r/AskReddit. Waiters, what dating disasters have you witnessed? I was a waiter at a very famous, upscale restaurant and a gentleman approached the maid, requesting someone take pictures of him proposing to his girlfriend. Since I was the closest asshole to the maid, I was tasked with performing this duty. After stalking the table for a solid hour, the moment was inevitably approaching. I set up at an angle she couldn't see me, and when he busted out the ring I started taking as many pictures as I could. Anyone who has tried to capture a once-in-a-lifetime moment on camera knows that you're not really watching what's going on, you're just trying to frame the moment. After about 20 to 30 pictures I slowly realized that she was declining the proposal and the scene was quickly degenerating into a 5-alarm dumpster fire. However, I was far enough away that I couldn't hear what was being said and couldn't be sure of what was transpiring, so I continued taking pictures just in case. Finally I stepped back and watched the scene unfold in reality as she stormed out of the restaurant in embarrassment, and he scrambled to pay the bill and chase after her. He'd requested that I use my phone and send the best pictures to him. Needless to say, he never approached us for the pictures, and I have about 100 plus pictures of a wedding proposal gone wrong somewhere deep in my iCloud photo bank. The sheer level of detachment from reality that someone has to have to get a no for a proposal astounds me. It happens. I was turned down by someone who had told me multiple times she wanted to marry me. But when push came to shove and she had to say yes, she couldn't. The attitude that somehow people who get turned down for proposals are doing something wrong because they should know the answer is yes is very annoying. That shit gets repeated and parroted by a bunch of people who probably haven't ever been in a situation where they have asked someone to make a lifelong commitment. I knew the answer was going to be yes because she told me multiple times beforehand that it would be. But then it wasn't. People are still people. At their core, everyone is a little unpredictable. I worked at a bar in a hotel for 5 years. I had a table come down from their hotel room and sit at one of my pub tables for dinner. From the moment they sat down, you could tell the wife was furious about something. She was unbelievably pleasant toward me, but did not say a single word to the man at the table. I get their drinks, and then their orders. He ordered steak and she ordered the sauciest pasta dish we had on the menu. About 20 minutes later, the wife still hadn't said a word to the man. Since they sat down, their food was done and my food runner set it on the table. Right as I was about to walk over to see if they needed anything else, I saw the woman stand up and said, "Go duck yourself, John," as she picked up the plate of pasta and dumped it all over his head and down into his lap. Then she very calmly walked out of the bar and back up to her hotel room. I spent a few minutes helping the man clean up and got my manager to come handle the situation from there as it was way above my pay grade at that point. Later in the night, the woman came back to the bar without the man and we talked for a while. Turns out he admitted to cheating on her right before their dinner reservation. I never saw either of them again. Why go out for dinner after admitting to cheating? Even if I was hungry, I would want to have a discussion about that. At least admit to the cheating after dinner. I was bartender at a country club in college and I watched a woman curse her husband out at their table because the husband kept flirting with the waitress. She got really loud and walked out. Keep in mind this was a nice restaurant at an upscale country club. The waitress felt it was all her fault, but she told me the guy had been coming in there often and tipping her 100% of the bill every time. I feel horrible because I'd never remember everyone who worked at mine's name, but they had to always remember mine. They really did flirt with you though. And they would hire the prettiest girls they could find. Drinking at a country club was a mess. They don't cut you off, and you can order whatever you want. This was probably about 4 years ago, in a joint called the Esquire Tavern on the River Walk. We had a street entrance as well as a river entrance, but from the river you had to walk up a really narrow metal staircase to our balcony. It barely had enough room for 5 small tables, including one that was tucked in a corner that made it hard to see from below. Anyways, it was a slow summer lunch, So I was doubling as a hostess, and this guy comes up from the river in trance and asks for a spot on the patio, specifically the hidden cramped one. No problem sir, I say, and I get him set up. We chat for a bit, I take his order, bring it out, and go about my business, which was to passively watch him through the window, because he was my only table and I wanted to keep an eye on him. I started to notice him suddenly ducking his head, as if he's trying not to be seen from the river level by someone. I remember pointing it out to another co-worker, who was just as curious as I was. Then we heard a woman scream, "There you are Marcus, you piece of shit." I could hear the staircase shuddering as someone was clearly stomping their way up it, and my coworker astutely dipped out to find the manager. The lady started laying into this dude, and all I could make out was something about ditching her, all the while he's just ignoring her and calmly eating his buffalo burger, lol, which made her snap. She slapped the shit out of this dude, telling him to ducking acknowledge me, and he simply got up, walked around her, and came inside to sit at the bar. She then sits down and starts eating this poor man's meal like nothing is wrong. By this point though the manager is here, and he goes outside and starts trying to kick her off the premises, while I go talk to Marcus and figure out what's what. The woman was his wife, and they had come downtown for lunch. She had a nasty habit of getting super ducked up and belligerent, which always ended up ruining their plans, including a wedding reception a few months prior. She refused to go get help, insisting that she'd keep her drinking to a minimum, and this was their first vacation since that incident. They had stopped at a brunch place around the corner and she proceeded to have 4 old fashions back to back. When she was ordering her 4th drink, he told her that she was already out of control, and that if she kept drinking he was going to close the tab and go eat lunch somewhere else, and that he'd meet her back at the hotel. She told him he was chicken shit, and that he wasn't going anywhere. So he got up, paid their bill, and walked out. I guess she thought he was putting up a front, and was actually waiting outside for her, then realized he wasn't. She started running up and down the river looking for him. He just wanted to finish his burger in peace, before dealing with her craziness. In the end, we had her ejected from the premises and my manager made him another burger on the house. A year or so later, we saw him at the bar with a different woman. He divorced his wife, and couldn't look happier. 2 guys and girl, let's call them John, Mark, and Janice. John and Mark's girlfriend Janice are fondling each other at my bar. Mark joins them at the bar and they quickly separate and behave. The 3 go off into the casino, but stop back for drinks a few times. Early AM, Mark does a shot and walks away. I can tell he isn't happy. He comes back and says he has a couple of hours to kill before his plane leaves. We get to chatting, and he tells me he just broke up with his GF as suspects she snuck up to the room and mailed his best friend when he couldn't find either of them for an hour. I ask if it was John and Janice, he confirms it, and I let him know he is making the right choice as they were making out at the bar before he came down. He thanks me for confirming, leaves a huge tip, and lets me know what is happening in case there is any confusion with the hotel. An hour or so later John and Janice are at the bar whispering and arguing. I casually ask if everything is okay. They say they are locked out of their room and can't find their friend who paid for the room. They tried to charge the bill to the room too, but my computer showed the room was empty. I told them Mark had been in earlier, but checked out, and his flight was already in the air. Then I watched the meltdown. Mark had paid for his best friend and his girlfriend to spend a week in Vegas with him. They cheated and got caught. He checked out and flew home, and they had nowhere to stay for the week, and no money for even basic food. Their luggage had been packed and left in the baggage hold. They did everything they could to get out of paying for their drinks as they were hella expensive, left no tip, and didn't have a place to sleep or even change clothing at 5 AM. Don't cheat on the person paying your way if you can't pay your own way. What do you do in those situations where they can't pay for drinks? Set up a payment plan if it's an upscale bar. Happens often, people order a very expensive drink, don't realize how expensive it is, and can't pay. The bar arranges it to be made in payments month by month, like what you do with a car. less expensive, they would either let them off, since it's not worth the time, or try and get them to send the money at a later date. I used to bartend at a Yard House in the before times. Yard House is a corporate place that's basically a nicer sports bar with a ton of beer on tap with stupid, giant novelty glasses. I had a couple at the bar during happy hour drinking from one of the big glasses and they ordered some onion rings that were half price. He jokingly proposed with an onion ring and she started laughing and jokingly said yes. Then he busted out an actual ring. She wasn't laughing anymore. I asked my wife to marry me. She didn't say no or yes. She just brushed it off. A few weeks later, out of the blue she jokingly says, "I'll marry you. I need insurance. My job doesn't offer it." I didn't care what the reason was, and didn't really believe the insurance reason, just happy she would marry me. As time went by, this started to eat at me, and about a year and a half later, she again out of the blue says, "You know I was joking about the insurance. I wanted to say yes the first time, but you caught me off guard, and I was embarrassed. The insurance thing was a way for me to bring it up again, and get you to ask me again." We've been together 13 years, and she still has good insurance. This happened when I was around 18 or so. I'm mostly Native American. This is an important factor to the story. A guy and his date sat in my section and he immediately asked to speak to my manager. This was before I even took their drink order, so I was perplexed, but went and grabbed him right away. The dude then asked my manager for a nice white server instead. Right in front of me. While giving me a rather disgusted scowl. His date was so horrified she stood up and said, "Oh hell no. That racist shit don't work with me honey. You can sit me at the bar sweetheart, this date is over." The manager made the man leave and calmed his date's food. She left the manager $100 tip for me with a note that said, "You are beautiful and worthy of respect. Always remember that." Her date was a disaster, but she made my night. I'm sorry you had to deal with him, but that lady's my hero. Your manager sounds cool too. I used to work at a bar where 70% of the customers were on Tinder dates. There was a line of 2-person booths along the wall when you first walk in. There were 2 dudes sitting by themselves in 2 different booths. Both of them were facing the door. One was in the first booth, one was in the last booth. This girl comes in and walks up to the first booth, says hi to the guy, and sits down. They are chatting for about 5 minutes when the other guy who is sitting by himself comes up to her and says, "Hey, I'm so and so, aren't you so and so?" They all talk for like 30 seconds, and she gets up and goes and sits with the other guy at the last booth. Eventually a different girl shows up for a date with the guy at the first booth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I almost died watching it unfold. She was definitely embarrassed. Oh man, I'm really bad at remembering faces. Walking into a restaurant for a first or second date and not being able to remember what the person looks like is such a nightmare. I'm married now, so I'm saved from the hell that is dating. Not a waiter, but I saw a first date next to me. In short, girl states she has an allergy to pineapple. Guy says, "Okay nah, I don't believe you kinda way." At some point he scraped some pineapple glaze off his dessert and onto her spoon when she popped outside to make a call. She comes back and eats without noticing too much, has a severe reaction. Guy freaks out and tries to run, but gets stopped by my girlfriend who is suspicious of him. Manager administers the girl's EpiPen and ambulance and police are called. Absolute clusterfuck situation. I worked fine dining in Vail, Colorado. I once saw a lady throw red wine all over a guy's shirt and leave. He sat and continued eating his spaghetti plate. No ducks. Shirt's already ruined. Now he doesn't even have to be careful with the spaghetti. I used to work as a hostess at a, thank deity it's the weekend already. Guy makes a reservation at the most booked table. It's by the window, all romantic etc. Also super visible from any other part of the restaurant. Comes in, all dressed up, and with a suitcase. Strange, but okay. A few minutes later, his date arrives. They laugh, flirt. We actually thought it's an anniversary or he's going to propose or something the way it was going. Nope. Halfway through the evening she starts screaming at him. He broke up with her and actually packed her suitcase. Then paid and left her there sobbing at the table alone. We got her a brownie on the house because just watching that we felt fucking awful. This is the worst day of your life. Take a brownie. This happened to a friend of my wife. She met a guy on a dating site. They agreed to meet at a strip mall parking lot and go to dinner together from there. He asks if he can drive her car because it's a Camaro and he's never driven one. So they go together in her car to a restaurant a couple miles away. Dinner goes okay, nothing too crazy. Then he gets up to go to the bathroom and never comes back. After 10 minutes, she gets up to check on him and her car is gone. He's dashed on the bill and stolen her car. She pays the bill and gets an Uber home and calls the police to report her car stolen. Turns out the guy just left it in the parking lot where they originally met and seems to think he did nothing wrong. Last I heard he's still being charged with auto theft. I genuinely can't imagine allowing a stranger to drive my car and then leaving the keys with them the whole night.